I'm a VFX artist, and in this video I'm gonna recreate a scene from the Loki series and turn this into this. So, last year, Marvel released Loki on Disney+, and yeah, I know that I'm late to the series, but in general, I really enjoyed watching it. But it was one scene that really caught my interest. It's in the beginning, when Loki is caught by the Time Variance Authority, aka TVA. In one of the elevators, he encounters this robot, and I just loved the aesthetics. Everything from the volumetric haze, the color grade, the vintage style, the animation of the robot, everything. And as someone that has done a lot of hard surface and sci-fi animations, I thought to myself, yeah, I could do this.
Glorious.
I don't know about you, but I'm really happy how my version turned out. And in this video, I'll walk you through how I created this scene from start to finish, so make sure to watch it to the end. I'll post the project file with all the models and animation on my Patreon, link in the description. Without further ado, let's begin creating. Before I open my 3D software, Blender obviously, I need to figure out the focal length and the perspective of the camera from the original shot. Luckily, we have a software that does this task perfectly, and it's called F-Spy. F-Spy is also compatible with Blender thanks to their add-on.
You son of a bitch.
And I'll add a link in the description where you can find this add-on to download. So, in F-Spy, you begin by locating the image you want to create the camera from. Here, on the left side, you can control which axis you want to use, and on the right side, you can see the focal length and the camera settings of the generated camera. After you've aligned the axes to the horizontal and vertical lines in the image, it's time to save it as a file. In Blender, we begin by deleting the default cube. Then, go into the preferences and make sure that you have enabled the F-Spy add-on. Now, you can import the F-Spy camera. As you can see, all the axes are aligned correctly. You can also set the opacity of the reference image while you're editing. Next step was to add the geometry. I added a simple plane and went into the edit mode and started to extrude the points and follow the vertical lines. Time to create the body. I used a simple cube and added a subdivision surface modifier to give the round shape. And now squish. Shade smooth. And here's a super neat trick. Instead of manually adding a Boolean modifier, enable the add-on called Bool Tool. This add-on makes it more efficient to work with Booleans. For instance, when I'm cutting into the body, I'm first selecting the shape that's going to intersect, and then the body, and by pressing Ctrl-, it creates a Boolean modifier and also hides the intersecting shape. Here's also a super neat trick. Go up to the magnet icon and enable it, and also select Snap to Vertices. Now, when you're adding the rim around the screen, the curve will snap to the body of the robot. Here I'm just adjusting the shape of the Bool Tool. To create some depth in the elevator, I'm extruding the creases of the wall and also subdividing to give it more smooth edges. To make sure we're going into the right direction, I'm adding simple lights and also adding some shaders to the elevator walls and the robot. It's also a good idea to play with the opacity of the reference image to see that it's looking good. Okay, now it's time to create the arms of the robot, and this process took like ages to do, but it's nothing fancy. It's a combination of extruding cylinders, adding cubes, adding subdivision modifiers, and the Bool Tool. Make sure to always use the reference image while you're modeling. But here's a quick montage on me modeling the arms. Let's go! Whew, that was fast. Alright, now it's time to add some bones. And a nice trick is to use the 3D cursor when adding new bones to make sure that the bone is aligned at the center of the mesh. And this advice is super important. Make sure to always name your bones while you're working, because later down the line, it's gonna be a pain in the ass when you try to locate the correct bone while you're parenting and doing some tweaking. Here I'm adding the metal shader to the arms. Now it's time to parent the bones to the arm. and I'm just pressing Ctrl P to parent the bone. To keep everything organized, I'm putting the arm into a folder and then duplicating it by mirroring it around the Z axis. And the same thing for the rest of the arms. Put them into a folder and mirror them. A good advice if you're going to animate the rig is to add some constraints to the bones, for instance here with the piston, and this is going to help during the animation process. To improve the elevated walls, I'm adding a simple displace modifier, and this will help achieving a more realistic look when the light from the ceiling is bouncing on the metal surface. And the next step was to add some haze. Here I'm adding a simple cube with a principal volume shader, set to value between 0 and 1. Now it's time to animate. Begin by picking an arm and use the reference video to see how the arm is moving in the reference shot. In the end, I decided to go my own route with my robot animation, so it's not really following every movement correctly. And here is why it's super important to constrain the axes of the arms, because now I can just drag them without worrying that they will move incorrectly. While animating, make sure to add a keyframe in the beginning and in the end of the movement, and then fill in the gaps to achieve a more fluid motion. In the original shot, the camera is quite static, but I decided to add some more movement to get a more dynamic animation.
Cable montage.
Alright, nice. For the face animation, I could have went into softwares like After Effects or DaVinci Resolve, but I decided to do everything in Blender. So for the eyes blinking, I used key shapes, and then I just modeled different mouths depending on what facial expressions the robot would have. And when I switched to facial expressions, I just inserted a keyframe and then moved the mouth out of the shot. To achieve the glitch effect, I used wave modifiers and also solidify modifiers. And to get this pixelated feel, I used remesh and blocks for each part of the face. Time to UV project the face onto the robot. I connected the face animation into the emission node on the screen and then bumped it up to the right strength. To create those iconic lines that you can see on old screens, I used a simple wave texture and edited the location and also the color ramp with keyframes throughout the animation. To finish off the elevator, I also duplicated the wall and merged them together. This helps when we're lighting the scene. In the original shot, they didn't use any doors, but I decided to add them anyways to give some more dynamic motion, and I animated them by using shape keys. I finished the scene up by adding some rusty metal onto the robot and also UV project the different metal parts of the hands. For the floor, I used simple checker textures and scaled it down to the right size. Now it looks really good. In the end, I decided to export using PNG format. I can recommend you using OpenXR if you want more information, but I was happy with the results. In DaVinci Resolve, I added some light flares to the mouth and eyes by going into the Fusion tab. Here I isolated the mouth and camera tracked and also the eyes and camera tracked, and used a simple light glare node. Then for the edges, to get a more anamorphic look, I added a radial blur node, and I decreased the intensity of the mask to get a more subtle transition. Finally, in the color grade tab, I gave it a more cooler tone, and I also adjusted the highlights and the contrasts. I also added a denoiser in the beginning and a film grain in the end to get this filmic look. And there we go! As I said, I'm super happy with the end result. And if you have any other movies or series you want me to recreate, just let me know down in the comment section. And I'm thinking of creating something from maybe the Dune movie, so stay tuned for that. But I hope you have a wonderful day and I'll see you soon.